My first name is Emmanuel, Porfirio, deMiranda, and Marshall. April 19th, 42. Your great-great-grandparents, they were from the island of Santa Lucia and from Haiti. The grandfather, Leslie Allen Marshall, he was English. Then my grandmother, her name was Felicita. I think it was Blanc, which means white, and as a second name. So the only paper that we had was from my grandfather, that his name was Leslie Allen Marshall. So my mother was Ruby Marshall. I am Miranda Marshall, because in Cuba we have both names, the father and the mother. Felicita, that she was born in Haiti, in Port-au-Prince. She lived in Port-au-Prince when she met my great-grandfather, that was an Englishman from the island of Santa Lucia. And for some reason then they moved to Jamaica, and there they had Leslie, they had like three of them, Linda, Leslie, and the other one that I never met. And my mother said that when she was little, she was speaking French with her. That they spoke French, so therefore she had to be from Haiti. And I only saw a photograph of her, and she looked like with long wavy hair, and her features were like an Indian, something like that. So she must be a mixed breed from French and black. One of the kids that was born in Haiti, he went to England and he became a diplomat, and he married a Russian girl in Riga, in Latvia. And the other one went to Trinidad, and he had a plantation in Trinidad, and he already passed away. But I never met them. They knew about us, but we never met. I heard that my grandfather, Leslie Allen Marshall, was a professional gambler. And he went from one island to the other and here and there, and they moved frequently, and they had horses, and they used to race horses here and there and there. Even my grandmother, when my grandfather died, she was in charge of the business of the horses. So at that time, she was a very liberated woman. Well, according to the papers, my mother was born in Balboa, in the Canal Zone in Panama. But then later on, we found out that she was actually born in Kingston, Jamaica. My mother was born, Ruby, Pearl, and Lou. They were born in Jamaica. Your great-grandmother, she said that kids were like Scorpios, that they eat the beauty of the mother. So they have to be as far away from them as possible. So when they were little, they were put in different convents, and my mother was in a convent in Panama. Maybe that's where she got that she was born in Panama. And the nuns used to take care of her. And all of them, they never grew up with a grandmother. They grew up in different institutions. She used to visit them once a year, gave them money for the year, and that's it. But for some reason, my mother got that fever that they have in the tropics, rheumatic paludism fever or something like that. And the nun said that they couldn't be responsible for her. So she reluctantly took my mother with her. Well, she was, she married her as soon as possible because she didn't want her around. So she married her to Chris, that was rather older than her. That's why she used to call him Daddy, because he was like the father she never had. They arranged that marriage. At that time it was like that. The second time she saw him, it was the wedding. For some reason they didn't. They went to Jamaica to get married, because my mother's eldest sister was there. For some reason, my grandmother never showed up, and something happened that we don't know what was it, but my grandmother was never mentioned in the family since then. So we never met our grandmother, neither Carmen or... Well, my grandmother was not very happy with that marriage, or something happened that I don't know. They decided to go to Jamaica because at that time, a relative had to give the bride. So if the mother didn't do it, so my mother's oldest sister in Jamaica was the one that made all the arrangements, and then they came to. When she married Christopher Silberg, he came to the United States when he was a teenager, and they were in Colorado. He was a cowboy, and then he joined the Rough Riders, Roosevelt's Rough Riders that invaded Cuba when Cuba was fighting against Spain. And then the Americans won, and I even have a photograph of him taking the hills of Santiago de Cuba and installing the American flag there. So after the war, he was a veteran of the Cuban War. He was like a hero, and then he decided to return to Cuba. I guess he liked Cuba. He had a contract, and he went to Camagüey. That's how we ended up being born in Camagüey, because he used to do those oil wheeling, things like that. And he had a contract for Camagüey. So that's where my brother, the one that died in the Second World War, William, was born, where Ricky was born, and when Carmen was born. Youngest is, it was Ricky. Then came Carmen, and he was always resented that Carmen was older than him, was just a year. And the other one was William, the first son. He joined the army during the Second World War. He was a pilot, and he was killed in Germany. And he lived there until he died. Carmen probably was 10 or something like that, or 12, Ricky. They have a year difference, and the other one was like 14, 15. William, right. She was a widow, and she got together with my father, that was a Cuban, Spanish descendant, and I was born in Camagüey. When I was born, Carmen was already 15 or 14, 14 to 15. So I was the last chance of her to have a son.
Right.
She was almost, she was 40 years when I was born, but she was very thin, and she looked like 20 and something. She didn't look like 40. But she was an old woman, elder, well, old enough to not to have sons. But she was with a new husband, so, and I was my father's first son, and he was so happy, and so I was born. Until I was a year and a half. Then my mother separated from my father, went to Havana, and I used to go to Camagüey in vacations, when I had vacations. So I was from Camagüey to Havana like a ping pong ball until I started school finally, and then I only went there when I was on vacation. I went to school for the first time when I was 7 years old. I already could understand English. I knew how to read and write. So I was the biggest in the class, and so I was promoted to third grade. Then when I reached sixth grade, I went to high school without passing the seventh and the eighth. I went to a German-American school that was nearby my house, and I went there.
In Cuba?
In Cuba, yes. It was from until the fourth grade. When it came to division, I couldn't do it. I'm still very bad at math, and of course at home, forget it, because my mother wouldn't waste her time teaching me how to divide, because she said in the United States you divide in this way, and here they divide in another way, and I don't want to mess with that, so let the teacher teach you. So I couldn't deal with that, so I was transferred to another private school where I found a very nice Cuban teacher that sat with me and helped me a lot. So when I was in the sixth grade, in Cuba, you had to do seventh and eighth before you went to high school. So at sixth grade, she knew that I was very advanced. So I went to the first Havana high school, and I did my test, and they said that I was ready for high school. So I started high school at 12, even though I started school at 7.
So how old were you when you got out of high school?
I was 16 to 17. And when I was 18 to 19, I went to Russia. Once I was in the biggest hall in Russia, dancing with that lady, and I told and I knew that the ambassadors were there, and the Cuban ambassador was there. So if he knew that I was dancing, and then he would ask, well, who the heck is this guy? So I told the guy that was introducing the artist, please do not say that I'm a Cuban student, okay? Don't mention me. And my name is Porfirio Miranda. So he announced Porfirio Mirandov. Dancing with Natalia Shapshaya and everyone, they thought I was a Russian that knew how to dance Cuban music. But the funny part was at the end I asked him, listen, did the Cuban ambassador ask anything about our performance? And he said he loved it. And he wanted to know who was the Cuban lady that was working with, that was dancing with a Russian guy.
Where?
I'm a translator because
Translator.
thanks God I got a diploma because the Russians knew that when you finish in Russia, sometimes you go to countries where they're not friendly with Russia.
Mm-hmm.
So for just in case if they imagine that I wouldn't be a lawyer, they gave me a diploma of translator. So I'm a Russian, French, and English translator. And then in Cuba, I became a language teacher too. A language teacher.
You were a teacher.
So I've been a translator, interpreter, teacher, lawyer,
Dancer.
dancer, and I also went to an art school and I learned some sculpture and painting. Мое имя Porfirio Yakubinets.
That was
Alors,
Russian,
je m'appelle Porfirio, je suis de Cuba.
French.
Bom dia, eu sou Porfirio, isto é português. Io mi chiamo Porfirio, that's Italian. What else?
You said Polish.
Shmu Emmanuel, that's Hebrew. You know, a little Hebrew too. Cubans have a great sense of humor. If not, they would have killed themselves a long time ago. But they make jokes about the worst things in the world. So my mother got that maybe from the Cubans or the Cubans from her. I don't know. Cuban nationality, even though we don't like to say that, doesn't exist. We are a country of immigrants, the same way the United States is. It's just that we have a great majority of Spaniards and Africans. So it's a mixture of Spanish, if you see a Spanish guy from the south, that is a Cuban. Okay, with a little bit of black, that is a Cuban. Okay, and Cubans are very happy, easygoing, very, I wouldn't say intelligent, very clever. They know how to go around things. They know how to. You could see Florida. Florida was a little country town, and now it's a prosperous city. They went there, and in 5 years they had the same factories they had in Cuba, and they had the things. Give a Cuban some capital, and he will succeed. In Cuba, the policy is to protect arts and things like that, but not because we're that artistic. We're more having fun people. That's why we dance and sing, and because we like to have fun, but not to be 7 years in a conservatory studying like the Russians do. The only thing you could do in Cuba, and you still can do, to get drunk. And I guess the government likes that because the less sober you are, the less you would be a threat for them. And a lot of people are becoming religious now. Cubans were never religious. 90% of Cubans were Catholics, but they never went to church. Only rich people went to church to socialize, and old ladies that had nothing else to do, and children before they do the first communion. But a grown-up man would never go to church. But there's a lot of evangelicals now, and of course there's like a 10% or maybe more of the population were Jewish, Spanish descendants, and even the synagogues. I went to a synagogue last time I was in Cuba, and it was crowded with young people that are converting to Judaism. In Cuba, you have to have an ID, national ID, that says who you are, where you live, even if you have criminal records, whatever. And anyone could be stopped at any time and anywhere, and you have to show that. If you don't have that, you go to jail until they find out who you are. So that's why for me it's very funny to see that all these anti-terror measures that are taken here, they're like a kindergarten compared with what we had in Cuba. Because you don't even have an ID card or nothing like that. Your driver's license, and sometimes it's... Havana looks beautiful, even though it's 47 years. They don't do anything new, but the parts that the tourists visit are beautiful. Now the parts where the Cubans live, and some parts, because some parts are beautiful, the buildings are destroyed, no paintings, no paints on the wall, and terrible. But that's the only difference, that whenever you go there, there's something missing, something that doesn't exist anymore, something that is worse. You go to other countries and you see new things and more beautiful things, and Even Jersey City, when I came here, it was like a nothing. Downtown Jersey City, there were the rats playing with light rails, and now you see all those big buildings, and it's like another world. And you go to Cuba, and it's all the contrary. Now that doesn't exist, and this doesn't exist, and this is worse, and we don't have this now. There are things in Cuba that I wouldn't like them to disappear. Okay? Like, for example, the health system, the education, and the great amount of money that they spent in culture and cultural things like that. Of course, they do it because of the propaganda. But anyway, it's an achievement compared with other countries in Latin America that are capitalist and far worse than Cuba. What I want is to this government to forget about Cuba and let them do whatever they want to do, to lift the embargo and let me go there to receive my checks like my mother did in the American Embassy. The problem is that in Cuba, there has never been a real communism. What we have in Cuba is feudalism. His own version of, he grabbed communism as he could have grabbed fascism or whatever, as an instrument of power. And what he is doing there is something that is his creation. It's nothing compared to what was going on in other countries of the world. So he is the one that defines the style of socialism or communism that they have in Cuba. And only when he will disappear, only when he will die, things might change. Because people are sick and tired of the whole thing. And even his close friends are sick and tired of it. They want to live openly. Okay? They all have bank accounts in other countries, they have here, and they want to live life. And the only one that is holding them, pretending to be communist, is him. So I know that as soon as he disappears, things will change. How they will change, I'm not sure. I don't think Cuba will go all of a sudden into capitalism, the American style. I think there's going to be a transition because there are many social things that have been installed in Cuba that are beneficial for the great majority of people. So people are not just going to get rid of the whole thing. There's going to be a process, and we'll see what's the end of the whole thing. My father married a woman, and they were the owners of a huge farm, and they had a factory, and they had a lot of things that were all nationalized. And they all came to the United States, and they lost everything. Well, imagine that I lost the house I rented. As soon as I left, I have to leave the TV, all my belongings there. And they were transferred to the person that the government decided to come to live here. I couldn't even take this or this or this and say, no, this is mine, I'm going to give it to Anna. No, it has to stay there. They make an inventory, and the day you leave, even the refrigerator has to be on the same spot. If it's not, you can't travel.
Wow.
Sometimes they inspect the stains to see the furniture, if the furniture has been changed for a new one or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it is. In Miami, my sister from my father's side, when she picked me up, she said, let me buy some Cold Cuts to have at home. And it was it was not a big supermarket. It was a small Cuban market. But they had an aisle just for hams and sausages and things like that. And in Cuba, you get 3 pounds of meat every 2 months. And wrapped in a thing, you don't even see the meat. When I saw all those hams hanging, and I had to go out, and I felt like disgusted. I felt so bad, dizzy and everything. And my sister asked me, "What's wrong?" No, it's nothing. I couldn't. And then she took me to buy a pair of jeans, and I bought a pair of jeans that didn't fit me because I just wanted to get out of there. I was so overwhelmed that I took one and left.
Did they fit?
In a country where no, they didn't. But anyway, I wore them. All the funny stories in my family that I know are around my mother. Because if you see the film Aunt Mame, she was Aunt Mame. She was constantly partying, dancing and drinking and whatever, but she wanted her cake and eat it. Okay, she wanted to be the big mother, and that she never gave up her sons. She didn't want to do what the mother did with her. So she kept the children very close to her, with the exception of Ricky, that flew away very, very when he was very little, and not little but young. And but she kept that life. So I had a nanny that was Geraldine from Jamaica. That was the one that really bought my shoes and took me here and took me there, because my mother was always partying. And I loved to go to school, and almost every day she told the driver from the school bus that I was sick. And I wasn't. I was eager to go to school. She's the one that had a hangover. And that's the way she was. But she was a very funny person. And the positive things was that she never gave up her kids. And secondly, that she had the rare ability to turn a tragedy into a party. When people had a very difficult time and they were crying, the husband left, and they went to my mother's to cry with her, and in 15 minutes they were listening to music and laughing. I don't know how she did it, but she could turn the tragic things into a party. She never worked because she lived receiving pensions from the first son that died in the Second World War, from the first husband, Chris. That's why she never married legally my father, because she would have to renounce to her independence. And she just went to I used to go with her to the American Embassy to get the checks and party. Beach, restaurants here, cabaret, whatever. She was the first lady in Camagüey that danced Charleston. And she was the first lady in Camagüey to wear panties. Because at that time, women didn't there were long things like that. So the first panties that got to Camagüey from the United States, my mother was wearing them, and she had a big party, and she was showing people how to dance Charleston, and the panties fell. And she removed them and continued dancing. She woke up early when we didn't have any activities, night activities, and the first thing she did was to go and make up completely, high heels, all jewelries, in the first thing in the morning. And the neighbor said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I don't know, but you have to be prepared." And that was true. In an hour or something, somebody came with a car, "Let's go to the beach." And she says, "You see, I'm prepared for the party." And sometimes she was washing the porch, throwing water on the porch, and they came and picked her up, and the neighbor said, "Alicia, what about the porch?" She said, "It will evaporate, my dear." Carmen never liked her to have a mother that looked younger than her, and at least that pretend to be younger than her. I remember when Carmen was young in Cuba, they used to go out shopping, and people used to, in Cuba they say piropos. How do you say piropos? They shout things to women.
Yeah.
"Hey, how beautiful are you? If you walk the way you cook, I'll cook all the meal," and things like that.
Yeah.
So they used to say that to my mother instead of saying to Carmen. And she was very embarrassed. And they even said, "Hey, girl, take care of that old lady. She is good." She was in Jamaica for 6 months because they didn't understand what she was doing in Cuba. When after the revolution, all American citizens or people that used to receive pensions and related to the United States were supposed to register and get out of Cuba, evacuated. But she never wanted to go out of Cuba. So it was strange for the Americans that this lady stayed in Cuba all this time without money and without anything. So she was like investigated to see if she was something strange. And finally she got to come here. But they were investigating her because she never declared at the American embassy that I was her son and that I was in Cuba. For the Americans, she only had Carmen, Ricky, and William, the one that died. So all of a sudden, she had another son that was studying in Russia, and she never said anything about it. And she said, "What son?" And they showed her my picture in a magazine that was the Russians had in Cuba the day I was graduating. They say, "Well, here's your son." When my mother came from Jamaica, they went to the airport to meet her. And Carmen says that was the most embarrassing moment in her whole entire life. When she came out of the plane, she was wearing a light green miniskirt like that she did especially to arrive in New York, in Jamaica. And she said, "My mother looks like a whore." Oh my God. And she said, what's wrong with my dress? She received her pension, so of course immediately they doubled what she was getting in Cuba because she wasn't even reaching the poverty level. And Carmen, the poor thing, she tried her to live in Jersey, but she hated it. And she wanted to live in New York, so she moved to New York. She got a very good apartment near the Central Park. And she was only paying like $80 or something like that.
Wow.
So, and far away from Carmen, she could continue partying and doing whatever she wanted to do. Well, after you have heard about your peculiar genes, okay, I think after this conversation you would understand better yourself and the way you are and your personality, because you can't run away from them. That's it.